Okay, it's being recorded, guys, so this will go up on YouTube later. So don't say anything to me you don't want the world to hear. Yeah.
Sir, you said it's going to be 8 weeks and the assignments are no longer 80%?
No. So the semester is now 9 weeks. It's not 10 weeks. That means that your final day of lectures will be the 25th of June. Okay. Now, in terms of assessment in project management, your assignments will add up to being 80% of your final mark. Your worst assignment, I'm not going to mark that. So I think there's going to be 7 assignments in total, or 6, I can't remember. I will take the best 5 or 6, okay? And that will be your assignment mark. The online exam, that is going to be between the 28th of June and the 9th of July. The day will be determined, a timetable for the exams will come out, but that will be worth 20%, and it will be a 1-hour exam, and it will be, it will be done, you will be given 1 hour to do it. And it's going to be done through Moodle, if you've ever done Moodle quizzes.
Never.
And, okay, it's going to be 100% multi-choice, just so you know. It's for my module anyway, project management, it's going to be multi-choice. Now, you will be given 1 hour to do it. I really think you won't need that time. You'll probably need half that time, but you'll be given 1 hour to do it. And the exam will be in the morning. If for whatever reason you cannot, there's a problem with the internet or anything, and you don't do the exam, you need to phone me, and then you will be able to do a resit exam that afternoon. And it will be different questions, so you can't copy off your friends. Also, the questions will be random. So I haven't decided, but I will probably make a bank of about 50 questions, and you will be given 25 of them, just so you know. And they will be randomized, so the answers will be in different orders. So you won't be able to do them together. So this is a way I can assess you with the work, and you won't have time to phone one another up and consult, because you're all going to be working on the exam. So yeah, there's nothing to be gained with trying to do the exam together. And it's worth 20%. So that's the assessment. Yeah, go Taba.
So that means we have 20% the exam, and then the assignments are
80%.
Okay. What about like, are there any other stuff?
No, nothing else. No, you need to have attendance in order to be able to do the resets if you need to. So the way I do attendance, guys, is because it's an ongoing issue with internet. The way I'm doing it is with participation in the assignments. So if you've submitted an assignment, I count that as attendance for the week. Now, assignment 1, Lausanne and Taba, you missed the deadline, didn't you, for that assignment? And you received zeros. I've counted you as attended for that anyway, because having spoken to you, it became very clear that it was mismanagement on your part rather than a lack of attendance. So yeah, but it's not being counted
Yes,
as
sir.
an
Thank you.
absence for you for that week.
Thank you, sir.
So really, you guys don't need to concern yourself with attendance. You're fine. Yeah,
But
just
sir,
submit the next assignments. That's all you need to do. Taba?
other than the assignment that's due 14th of this month, is there going to be another one?
Yes. There will be
And
another.
then,
There'll be another one on time management, and that'll probably be due on the 21st. I haven't written it yet, and possibly I will have another small assignment for quality management, and that will be due on the 25th. That's I'm thinking along those lines. But I don't want to inundate you with assessment on that final week, because I know that there's probably going to be a lot of assignments due that week for you.
okay, sir. And I was just looking at the slides for the second lecture of time management.
Okay,
And there's this
before we
part-
move on to time management, do you guys have any questions about the assessment and the new way this module is going to be assessed, or the exam or anything like that? And then we'll get to the course material. Sorry to cut you off there, Taba.
No, it's okay. It's clear to me. I don't know
Okay.
about those.
Okay. Well,
No, sir, it's clear to me
Okay.
too. Thank you.
Guys, I just wanted to apologize to you. I personally think it's very unfair that the module descriptor keeps changing. I want you to know that there's nothing I can do about that. This is something that has been told to us by the Ministry of Higher Education. And they've told us very late. And also, I'm quite unhappy that suddenly the 10-week semester has been reduced to 9 weeks as well. That just makes teaching more difficult.
Why did they reduce it, sir?
Because of deadlines that the Ministry of Higher Education gave them. I'm not privy to all the details. Yeah, I'm not sure. I can tell you that it's been very difficult for the university to manage with coronavirus and all these changing goalposts. At one stage we were going to go back to the semester in June, and then right now I'm wondering if this is actually going to affect us into the second semester, to be perfectly honest. You won't be here to have any concerns about that, thankfully for you, but
it will. It will affect our graduation ceremony.
Yeah, it will affect the ceremony, but that's small in comparison to trying to do the coursework. But I just wanted to say thank you for your perseverance. There's been a lot of scope creep this semester for you, and I think you've handled it amicably well.
So I was frustrated yesterday, and I was on the verge of sending an email to like everyone and telling them like you wouldn't let us change a thing about module descriptor when you said it, but now every day it's changing on us.
I certainly hope the module descriptor I've just given you is the final module descriptor. It kind of defeats the purpose if we keep changing the module descriptor as the course goes through. But that's what it is. The other option we had, Taba, was to postpone the online exam, the on-campus exam until September. And I said, that's just ridiculous. Everyone's going to forget the course material over the summer. I've got students who are graduating. They don't want to come back to the university to do an exam in September. And the students felt the same way, I think. So that's why we're doing this online exam, so we can basically do away with on-campus exams in September, because that's not going to be good for anyone.
There will be a final report, but you said we can just put all our assignments.
The final report, forget about that, Taba. Report is just a word that the Ministry of Higher Education have given us, but it can be a compilation of your assignments. So what I will do, you don't need to worry about this. I'm keeping all of your assignments. If they ask for, when I submit your grades to registry, I will be compiling all of your assignments in a PDF and calling it reports. Okay, so this is where Dr. Abbas was a little bit confused last week because of the misinformation. It doesn't, if he wants to do this, he can, but the report doesn't need to be an additional assessment on top of your assignments. It doesn't need to be. Some module leaders may decide to do that, but there's no reason why they have to do that. So I've decided to basically just compile your assignments and make it 80%. Lausanne?
Sir, yeah, about the final report, my sister studies in another university, and they basically told her she just has to write a summary about whatever she learned in that class, and that's it.
Yeah. Do you think that's a good way to assess people?
Not really, sir, but this is what they meant, like about the final report when the minister was talking about it.
I mean, they've been very unclear with us, the Ministry of Higher Education, as to what the report needs to detail, and really a better word they could have used is portfolio rather than report. Basically most other universities, they've had no assessment, and now they're playing catch up. Oh my goodness, how do we assess students without an exam, without any previous assignments? And they're basically saying, write a report, and they're writing a detail. You get so many marks for introduction, so many marks for conclusion, so many marks for method or body, and so many marks for results, or something like that. I mean, how are you meant to do a report like that for a module like statics, for example? It's ridiculous. It's a silly way to assess what you've learned. At the same time, we are busy trying to get our degree at UKH accredited by ABET, which is an international accreditation agency. They are completely going to dismiss modules which have that kind of assessment. So we've got to try and appease the Ministry of Higher Education for legal requirements, but we've also got to try and appease ABET so that we can show that the degree you've got is of an international standard, which it is compared to other unis in Kurdistan. So yeah, that's how we've come to where we are now, Lausanne.
Sure.
Yep.
You in your email you said the capstone project will be like the deadline will be 14th. Is that your decision for your students, or is that for everyone?
That's for everyone. Yeah.
And you said we have to give a presentation. You mean in uni?
Probably not. That would probably be by Zoom, just so you know. So usually
so there
what
has to be a presentation.
Well, usually the main part of that will be your supervisor and one other who've read your final report. They're going to be asking you questions. That's the main part of it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So just to make sure you didn't copy it off Google Scholar. So, and you'll be fine. So that it's basically a way of us assessing, and also potentially if there's holes in your research, we can define that and explain it. And if necessary, you may need to rewrite part of your report, similar to a reset. But you don't need to stress too much about that, Taba. Focus on the final report. That's the main part.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Sir.
Yeah.
Lozan, are you asking questions for the assignments and stuff?
What, Taba?
Do you have any questions? I'm gonna ask him about the lecture now.
Yeah. Before.
No.
Okay.
No,
let's.
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Thanks, Lozan. So let's go off into the lecture material. Lozan, have you seen the time management lectures at this stage?
I'm sorry, what, sir, what did you say? Your voice was cutting off.
Okay, I apologize for that. Have you seen the time management lectures at this stage?
No, sir.
Either of them?
No.
Okay.
No, sir.
Okay. So Taba, what was your question on time management? Taba?
Oh, sorry, sir. It was unmuted and I was speaking. It was muted, I mean.
Oh, no problem. That's fine.
There was this chart called Gantt or something.
The Gantt chart, yes.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, like, is that a new thing or is it old? Do they use it here?
I mean, yeah, they use it all the time in time management and project management. As I've said before, time management is a very, very weak area of expertise in Kurdistan. It's done very poorly. But they do use Gantt charts. And one example is actually the 150-meter road project. That's one project where they are actually doing that at a good speed. There aren't lots of delays with that project. There's still plenty of room for improvement. But when I went to their site office, I met the planner and he was working on a Gantt chart there. And it had about 200 or 300 activities for the 150-meter road project. So it does happen. It's used a lot more than CPM. You do need to, you will use Gantt charts at some point in your career, but it may depend on where you end up working. In Kurdistan, you may only come across it maybe once or twice a year. If you go to outside the Middle East to work at some point, you will probably be seeing Gantt charts every week of your career. They're very common.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. But they're not hard to understand,
and so
are
when
they?
There's a mismatch. Maybe since it's new, it's kind of hard for me now.
Okay.
But
okay. I will. I'll try and give you a bit of instruction in a moment on Gantt charts.
What software is it? Like, is it?
So Gantt charts, Gantt charts are basically a type of bar graph. So you can draw them by hand, but the software that nearly all project managers use is something called Microsoft Project. So I've put a link to a small 3-minute video of Microsoft Project, and that shows you just how the software works. You won't be assessed on that. If we were learning this on campus, I would have done a lab on Microsoft Project with you, but yeah, that's not going to happen. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, why don't we look at a Gantt chart and just try and figure out, see if we can understand what it's showing. So your issue, Taba, is you're not actually sure you're not sure what is what the Gantt chart is showing exactly, or how to read a Gantt chart. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go to screen share then. Okay. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Time management, part 2.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that's an example of a critical pathway method. I tried to go through that very slowly when I did the recorded lecture, but if anything's unclear there, please let me know. You will be asked to do a critical pathway method for assignment 6.
But sir, imagine if they are doing a dam project.
Yeah. How many activities?
Isn't it way too much?
How many activities would there be in a dam project for
Like
if you were building?
thousands.
Yeah, probably. It's massive. It depends how much you want to break down the work packages into smaller activities, but it's huge. So that's why this is the big problem with critical pathway methods.
I think another reason why they have really like a lot of difficulty with managing the time is because in the beginning it goes really well according to plan, and then right in the middle they run out of cost. Like they run out of cost.
They run out of money.
I guess they provide the money like.
Yeah, so they run out of money and then the project stops, and then they've got to go looking for other investors. Is that what?
Yeah, but what's confusing is why would they not like make money for the entire project and then start it, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think what they do is they give it to the contractors like in specific time ranges.
Yes. We can talk more about why that is. I will talk more about why that is in lecture 3, Taba.
Oh yeah, you told me. Okay, sir.
But yeah, projects take way too long in Kurdistan. So long. I mean, China, that's how they can build a hospital for 5,000 people in 1 week. That's amazing. That's just incredible. But what's normal to build a hospital for 5,000 people? The construction for that shouldn't be more than 2 years. It really shouldn't. Meanwhile, in Erbil, how long have they been building? Let's say, what's the name of that mall across the street from me? The Zarko Mall, or whatever it's called, Zara Mall, Gulan Mall, I think it's called. They've been working on that for over 6-7 years. It's just absolutely ridiculous, and that's just a shopping mall. It's not a hospital. I'll go through why all the reasons why I think it is so terrible in Kurdistan, and how you as Kurdish engineers can improve the situation. But yeah, this is actually a critical pathway method picture I'm looking at right now. this is laid out a bit different to the example I showed you before, because it's actually the layout here is actually activity on arrow rather than activity on node. And so if you actually bring your cursor over this in the computer program and you put it over an arrow, it's going to actually pop up with information about the activity. But that's so confusing, isn't it? It's absolute jargon. And there's only probably 100 or so activities there, 200 or so. It's not that many. Whereas, yeah, with a good time management of a project, they could be breaking an activity down into hundreds, even thousands of activities. So the critical pathway method, we do use it usually at very preliminary stages and usually with very generic activities, so foundation and detailed design. We won't break those work packages down into more specific activities. But really, when we're actually in the design or construction phase of a project, we're going to be using a Gantt chart. So yeah, the Gantt chart was developed by a guy called Henry Gantt in America in 1917. My dad actually had a lecture with him in the 1970s. He gave a lecture at my dad's university. He was in his 80s at the time, but yeah, he developed this idea, and it's very common in civil engineering. So here we've got a Gantt chart for the construction of a residential house. Okay, can you read this one? Can you see these columns here? Or is that too small for you guys? What if I enlarge this? Does that help? Can you see that?
It's not that clear, sir.
Okay. Okay, I won't use...
No, I can see it, yeah. I can read them.
Now
Yeah.
I can.
Okay. It's not the clearest. I'll just see if I can find another slide here. Okay, let's look at this one. This one's pretty clear, isn't it? So on the left-hand column, Taba, you've got all of the activities, just like you would have with a critical pathway method. And these activities, it's very good how you can actually have major activities broken down into sub-activities. So do you see that? Because that's something you can't do with the critical pathway method. So installing the drywall, you can look at that as just one activity here. Can you see my cursor, guys?
Yeah.
Okay. Or it can be 6 activities broken down into these smaller activities here, okay?
So why don't they make one section just about installing drywall for first floor?
Because you may want more detail. So if you were the big project manager, you probably don't need that much detail. You would just be looking at drywall and you would not break that down further. But if you were the head engineer of the drywall department for the project, you're going to want your time management broken down into smaller activities, aren't you?
Okay.
So it depends who's looking at the Gantt chart, what sort of level of detail they want. Now, second column, you have the estimated days that it takes to build for each activity. So you can see drywall, this activity is 9 days. And all the sub-activities, their durations, the sum of them add up to 9 days, okay? And then you've got a start date, and automatically you will have an end date too. So you're basically looking at, you don't do early start date and late start date like you do with critical pathway method. You don't do that. So you just put in the start date, the early start date effectively. So that's how you do that. And let's look at this column here. Install drywall first floor. That will take you 2 days, and you're going to start it on the 16th of February. Now look at this bar here. How long is it? Well, it starts on the 16th of February, and it finishes on the 19th of January. Sorry, 16th of January, and it finishes on the 19th of January. Why is this 4 days, not 2? It's because it goes over a Sunday and a Saturday. And that's obviously the weekend in this country. You're not working on Sunday or Saturday, okay? So the 2 days in duration, those are working days. So Friday and Monday. Does that make sense? Are you with me, guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. But how do we decide how long each of these bars are? Do you see some of them are long, some of them are short? Well, it depends on the duration. And up here at the top, we have the dates. So here is the start date, and down here is the finish date for this activity here. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What are there? Okay. What about this activity here? What's that? Complete communications wiring, phone, cable, computer. What are the prerequisites of this activity? What's the prerequisite? Are there any? Well, it's actually up here, conduct finish plumbing inspection. How do we know that? Because it's joined up with an arrow. So just as you have an arrow going from a prerequisite to a successor activity, you have the option of having those arrows in Microsoft Project. You can also unclick the box and all the arrows will disappear and it becomes a little bit easier to read. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Now, where's the critical pathway? In the Microsoft Project, it's easy. You can click a box and all of the critical pathway will turn to red. And so it's much easier to see. So let's look at this activity here. Install first floor kitchen cabinets. How much total slack is there for that activity, Taba?
1 second, sir.
Just think about it. I'll give you a clue. I'll just state the question again. This activity, which is on the critical pathway, how much total slack is there? I've given you a clue in the question.
3 days. 3 days.
No, you're thinking of the duration, aren't you there? So it's starting on Tuesday and it's finishing on a Thursday. No, total slack is always 0 when it's on the critical pathway. If you delay the delivery of that activity by even 1 day, you're going to be delaying the entire project by 1 day. There is zero slack on the critical pathway.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's so stressful though.
Why is that stressful?
Like for the people who are working.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why if you're working on an activity which is on the critical pathway, you put most of your resources into that. What about up here? Conduct insulation inspection. What's the duration of that activity there?
One day.
Very good. Excellent, Taba. Brilliant. When do you what's the start date?
Right, yeah.
What's the start date?
The 28th.
The 29th of January. Very good. Yeah. And when will they finish it? What date will they finish it?
29th.
Very good. Okay. What are the successors to the conduct insulation inspection? What are the activities that can only happen after the conduct insulation inspection is finished?
The tape and float? No, wait. Yeah, no. Actually, there's nothing connected to it.
Yeah, well, actually, there's an arrow that comes along here.
Oh, yeah.
And then it disappears down here. We can't actually see it, but basically that's the end of the end of the project. That's what it's covering. So what is the total slack for conduct insulation inspection? Sorry, did you hear me okay, guys, there? Taba, Lausanne?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What's
the total slack?
Yeah. What's the total slack for...
You said we have no slack.
Well, I said there's no slack for this activity, but what's the total slack for this activity here? Can you see my cursor? Can you see my cursor, guys?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So there was zero slack for this activity because it's on the critical pathway. But how much slack is there with this activity? How much can we delay this activity without causing a delay to the entire project? Total slack.
Oh,
well,
actually.
That is indicated by this long arrow to the successor. It is the amount that its arrow travels to its successors afterwards. And so we can see that this 1 day activity, we can delay this by, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, by about 6 weeks. And it's not going to affect Yeah. So we could do this activity way out here, and it's not going to affect the project delivery. So that's how we view total slack. It's the length of line, how it travels horizontal to the final activity. So all of this activity too will also have about 6 weeks of total slack. This activity here will have about 6 weeks of total slack. But here's another question. How much free slack is there with placing ceiling insulation on the second floor, that activity there? So we've determined that there's about 6 weeks of total slack, but how much free slack is there? Do you know the difference between total slack and free slack? Okay, So total slack is the amount of breathing room you have where you can actually extend that activity without delaying the entire project, not delaying the project. But free slack is how much you can extend an activity without delaying any of the next activities. That's what free slack is. So here,
Yeah,
go on, Taba.
but with this one, but with the conducting installation inspection, I don't see any arrows that are connected to it, like downwards.
So you mean arrows that are coming out of the conduct insulation?
Exactly.
Okay, this
Isn't
line.
that how we know?
Yeah, this line here is an arrow. So
yeah, but that one is the total slack, right?
Yeah. So, but we're looking. Yeah. So free slack is the same as total slack for this one, conduct insulation, because remember, free slack is how much you can delay the activity without delaying the next activity. And because the next activity coming off conduct insulation is actually the end of the project, the total slack and the free slack are exactly the same. But what I mean here is this activity here. Place ceiling insulation, second floor. Now, what is we've already determined that the total slack for that activity is the same as for this one. It's about 6 weeks.
It has no free slack, sir.
Why does it have no free slack, Taba?
Because we have to get the conduction of the installation.
Oh, Taba, give yourself a cookie. That's excellent. So the basically free slack is how much you can delay. Yeah, very good, Taba. It's how much you can delay this activity without delaying and affecting this activity. And that is 0. So even though it has a total slack of about 6 weeks, it has a 0 free slack because it's going to affect this activity. Okay. What about this activity here? What is the total slack? And what is what's the
place wall insulation?
Yeah, place the wall insulation second floor. What's the total slack?
About a week and...
No. Total slack. Remember, total slack is how much you can delay this without delaying the entire project.
Yes, sir. It's connected to the place ceiling insulation.
Okay, so if we were to delay this by, let's say, 6 weeks, this little bar would be way out here, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And then where would the place ceiling insulation be? It would be about here. And the conduct insulation inspection would be about here. We're taking all 3 of those bars and we're moving them.
0 free slack.
It has a total slack of about 6 weeks, because basically total slack is the measure of how much we can delay an activity without delaying, the end of the project.
Yeah, I got it. Because the other one, which is the conduction of the insulation, it can happen 6 weeks later, right?
Yeah,
and we're doing the wall for that.
So the total slack is the same for all 3 of these activities.
Okay.
Now, actually, no, this one actually is a bit more because you've also got some room to move here. What's the free slack for place wall insulation on the second floor?
About like a week and a few days.
Yeah, it's about 2 weeks. It's that distance there.
Yeah.
So it's how much you can delay the wall insulation before the successor is impacted, which is placing the ceiling insulation.
Yes.
Okay. And yeah, so with a Gantt chart, it's actually very easy to see the total slack and the free slack. You can look, potentially Cardo is working on installing drywall here, and he's thinking, oh gosh, I've got to work really diligently because this is critical pathway. Meanwhile, Taba, her activity is this, placing the wall insulation, and she thinks, you know what, I can take it easy. If this gets delayed by a few days, it's no biggie. It's no big problem. But often what will happen is, as an engineer, you will have lots of different activities you're involved in. You might be involved in this activity and this activity on the same day. What should you focus on? Well, you should be focusing.
The red one. Very
good. Yeah. So, yeah, the Gantt charts are really good for communicating. It takes a little bit of a while to learn how to read them, but once you do, they're actually quite simple. And Microsoft Project makes it even easier because you can just click and unclick boxes to say show predecessor arrows, show critical pathway, and it just becomes very clear. You can show sub-activities or not show them depending on the level of accuracy you need. And so, yeah, it's a very useful thing. And the durations are shown by the length of bar. Is there anything else there that's a little unclear to you with the Gantt chart?
No, sir.
Okay.
So what software do they use for this?
Where do they use Gantt charts? Are you asking?
No, like what software do they use to create?
So the main one, the industry favorite, is something called Microsoft Project.
Okay.
There is also another kind of software which is a bit cheaper, which is called ProjPlan, I think, PROJPLAN. I think I actually, yeah. OpenProj, right here. OpenProj, that's another kind of software. It's just a rival company. But yeah, they're pretty good software packages. I personally would never do a Gantt chart unless I had the software for it, because Gantt charts, you have to constantly update them. And if you have the software, you can just change the date, change the duration, and then everything updates automatically. If you've actually drawn it out by hand and then you make an amendment, yeah, you've got to screw it all up and start again, basically. And yeah, that's just too difficult. So yeah, that's Microsoft Project. That's OpenProj. Any other questions on Gantt charts at this stage?
No, sir.
Okay. A couple of other advantages is with a Gantt chart, unlike the critical pathway method, you can actually show progress much better. So on any given date, you can ask your engineers, how far have you come with completing this activity? And they can say, well, we've finished it, it's 100% complete. Or they could say, oh, yeah, this is the slide. Or they could say, I've completed 50% of this activity. And basically you can show this by filling in the bar with a different color. So where it's green, that is showing how much of the activity has been completed. And so if you have a red line that you can click on for the Open Microsoft Project, you can say show today's date line, and this line will pop up. you can see, well, if the green goes over that line, we know that we are ahead of schedule. But for any project, any activities where the green line is behind, we know we are behind schedule. We need to work a bit harder there. And you can see also here that you've got an added column progress with a percentage. The percentage of that activity has been completed. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The other really useful thing you can do with a Gantt chart is actually have, sometimes with activities, they are partial prerequisites. That means we can begin an activity after 50% or 70% or whatever of a previous activity has been completed. So in this Gantt chart below, you've got two activities. You've got reading, so reading research, and then the literature review write-up. Now, in truth, when you did your literature review with your capstone project, you didn't need to do all of the reading and then begin the write-up. There could have been a little bit of overlap. You could have started reading on one part of your research and then started writing that up and continued reading other parts of the research topic. So that it didn't need to come right at the end of the reading. There could have been overlap. So when you do your time management, you could say 50% of the literature review needs to be completed before the write-up can be begun. And so here you can see that the prerequisite line comes out of this activity at the halfway point. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is a great thing. With critical pathway method, if you wanted to show that level of detail, you would need to break this activity into two separate activities and call it basically reading part 1 and reading part 2. And it just adds an extra level of confusion. Okay. And so literature review write-up, that would be a successor of reading part 1, but not reading part 2, for example. Now, the other great thing, remember we had this big issue with critical pathway method, how we couldn't actually assign resources. So we had that example up above of, okay, Cardo here, he's thinking, I have a lot of total slack with my activity, making a sub base. So I'm going to go really easy and go slow. Meanwhile, Avan, if she is delayed, it's not going to affect this activity much because it has a lot of total slack too. But Avan will be affected because she has other activities which are on the critical path. So the critical path is shown by red arrows here, whereas these ones are not on the critical path. Because with the critical path method, you're only ever looking at the activity and not about the resources or the people that have to do those activities. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of the great things with a Gantt chart. You can fix this. Let's look at a Gantt chart here. Okay, so with this Gantt chart, you are also giving a resource. You're saying who is in charge of building or in charge of carrying out that activity. And it's in this column here. I'll just enlarge that so you can see this activity, that must be done by the builder. This activity must be done by the civil engineer. This one must be done by the excavator, and so on and so on. Does that make sense? Now, these activities, these are showing the tasks. But what you can do is once you've made your Gantt chart for your tasks, you can come up to View and show Resource Gantt charts. There's an option where you can do that. And what you're going to get is actually something that looks like this. This is your Gantt chart for resources. These bars are not tasks. It's basically your calendar. These are your resources. Here it's your human capacity. So these are all of the members of the project team. And these are the activities that they're working on. So you can see here, Alex Exler, he has an activity for about half a week here, starting on the 14th of February, and then an activity here starting at around probably the 26th of March for about 1 week. Now, what we can see here is that Alex Exler, he has no work to do for about 3 weeks, just in here. So what can we do? Well, we can probably try and find more work to give to Alex Exler. We can put him on a critical pathway method project, such as this one here, and it's critical pathway because it's dark. And we can say, oh, look at poor Eddie Bridges. He's working on this project, this activity, all by himself, and that's critical pathway. What we'll do is we'll get Alex and Eddie to work on that critical pathway together, because Alex has room, he can do that, and by having more resources working on the critical pathway activity, we can reduce the overall duration and potentially finish the project ahead of schedule. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so Gantt chart, human resource people, they love Gantt charts as well, because they can see who's got capacity for more work and which people are being overloaded, and that's going to affect the quality of their work as well. So, and the bars here that are dark, those are critical pathway. The ones that are light grey, that means they are marginal, meaning that they're not critical pathway, but they could become critical pathway if there's a small delay or so on. So, yeah, and the light ones, they are non-critical. So who's the busiest worker there, according to the Gantt chart? Not too sure. It might potentially be this guy down here, Scott Lynch. But you can see there's a lot of big gaps in here, which tells you that there's a lot of room for improvement. Potentially you don't need such a big project team, or maybe these people could be employed on an hourly rate rather than a salary, because it seems like there's a lot of downtime between activities. So that's another use for Gantt charts. Does that help you, Taba? That little overview of Gantt charts?
Yes.
Okay. Lausanne, is this reasonably clear for you, even though you haven't covered Gantt charts yet?
Kind of, yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So I think Gantt charts are really good. One of the disadvantages of them is you can't really draw them very well unless you have Microsoft Project. So if I ask you any questions in the assignment, I will give you a Gantt chart and you need to answer questions like how much total slack is there for this activity or something like that. But I will probably ask you to make a critical pathway method in the assignment. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that enough for today, or do you have any more questions?
I don't have any questions.
Would you like me to try and explain a bit more about Gantt charts or critical pathway
No,
method?
sir, I got it.
Okay. Okay, well, I guess that's the end of this tutorial. I'll put this tutorial up on YouTube today.
Sir?
Yep.
About
Taba, sorry.
About the assignment that's due next week.
Sure, yeah. Are there questions on that? Yeah.
No, but if I have a question, I don't know, I already called you, but can I call you again?
Yeah, sure, yeah. You can ask me questions about the assignment beforehand. For me, the assignments are about learning, so if you have to ask me about a question or you want me to explain it, I'm not going to give you the answer, but I will help you understand it so you can answer it and get full marks.
Okay, sir, thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, you've got my number and my email, and if necessary, we can have a Zoom tutorial to discuss the question if needed.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
Okay, catch you later, guys. Okay, God bless, guys. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye, sir.